All right, welcome to the WTF Divorce podcast. Today we are talking to New York divorce attorney Evan Wiederkehr. Evan, how's it going today?
Good afternoon, Rob.
All right, well, Evan and I were chatting, and he had so many gems that I said we got to get on a call and record this. What was one of the first things you said? You're like, everybody thinks their divorce lawyer is the asshole.
Everybody thinks their divorce lawyer is the asshole, but that's what people look for. Whether people cannot or will not say or do things that they think need to be said or done, that's the reason why you have the lawyer. The lawyer takes the lead and makes clear the positions that you want to be made clear, but don't feel like you can for one reason or the other. If you could say these things on your own, you wouldn't need the lawyer.
That's true. So this idea of we all want an amicable divorce. Is there such thing as a completely amicable divorce? How do clients come in and what do they say they want the result to be in their divorce?
So over the last 25 years or so, I've had my share of clients come in and say they want an amicable divorce, but somewhere along the path, amicable is no longer available. Conflict is relative. There could be a little conflict or there could be a lot of conflict. It's always best to have a little conflict, but at some point, people who are getting divorced have divergent views. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be getting divorced. So it's always preferred to remain amicable, especially when kids are involved. That requires two people who are willing to compromise and acknowledge that they're not going to get everything that they want or think that they need. But it's unusual not to have some level of conflict. The trick is to manage the conflict and be respectful while you're asserting your position and explain why you can or cannot do something or will not do something. And try not to let it escalate unnecessarily.
And how does it work when your client is the reasonable one and you want to go about something in what seems to be a effective, reasonable way where everybody wins, but the opposing client, their attorney, really is the asshole and they just want to push it? Is that something that you encounter a lot?
Sorry for the siren. You ask an interesting question, and it's actually something that I see all of the time. The reasonable person remains reasonable. And that is the person that often compromises far more than they otherwise should in order to keep moving forward. So a lot of times the judge will say, it's going to cost you a ton of money to litigate this. And the reasonable person has a healthy fear and says, I don't really want to piss away resources fighting unnecessarily. And that reasonableness is seized upon by the other side. The other side thinks they can push and push a little more and just get that much more because the other person knows that resolution is better than litigation. And if the other lawyer smells that and is the type of lawyer to exploit that, they will. I tell my clients all the time, I know that you're desperate to settle this, and I respect that. Do not ever say that to anyone else but me. Because if somebody else finds out and it gets back, it'll be exploited. You got to take a much more stoic approach. The process is what the process is, no matter how much it's burning you up inside. They said in The Godfather, never tell anybody outside the family what you're thinking.
What do you tell your clients? So when they go home, they're in the middle of this divorce, they're living with their wife at the time. Those conversations can be extremely tense. And it is, like you said, it's kind of like a poker game where you do want to keep your cards close to the vest. What kind of advice do you tell your clients when the other side is engaging with, or you're dragging this out? What should somebody say to their wife or husband when they're in the middle of a divorce?
Always be cordial. Less is more. It's when those conversations happen, they usually end with my client calling me and saying, listen, I just want to give that up. which is fine because it is that person's life and that person's choice. But that's usually the end result. I can't do this anymore. And again, that might be a knowing and intelligent decision to make. Just own it. Some people say, I don't want to spend $30,000 or $40,000 fighting over $50,000 or $60,000. I largely agree. But in the home, there's generally a power dynamic that exists. It's like when people say to me, my husband says we have to mediate. And I say, I think that that's a mistake. I said, because your husband's going to dominate the interaction. And the mediator is going to sense that and align in order to close it out. It's a very unique mediator that will push back and take care of the weaker party in that arena. And that's why people need lawyers, because no matter how amicable you want to be, there's an inherent conflict that exists in a divorce. Each party wants something, and oftentimes those things conflict. You need someone whose singular role and function is to not only advise you, but look out for you. I'm not saying that a lawyer should do things that have no basis in fact or law, but a lawyer should advise you and educate you as to the realm of possibilities, let you decide, and then be your voice. And I tell people all the time, the lawyer works for you, not the other way around. Anytime when a client says, oh, my lawyer made me do it, that's not a positive attorney-client relationship.
So what happens when you're at that point where I think you hear a lot too is like, oh, they're threatening, they want the kids 100% of the time, 80% of the time. I'd rather give up the money, or I'll give in here or there just so I can get half the time with the kids. That feeling of the like loss aversion, like anything to avoid that. What do you tell a client in that position?
Rob, you ask good questions. So I've experienced this more times than I can count. And what I counsel clients is, in this particular instance, to say, your wife's position is not well supported, but you're not going to change how she approaches this. My suggestion is you don't burn resources with lawyer letters that serve no purpose, with emails and phone calls. You can serve your resources and you say, we'll let the judge decide. And I've done that frequently. And then you get in front of the judge and the judge says, what is your position? What is your position? And hopefully the judge looks at the other side and says, well, that's not going to happen. It takes the wind out of their sails.
But you can talk a big game though up until you see the judge though, huh? You feel like I guess we all feel like we're going to lose until you face that moment.
Exactly. And trends in custody have definitely shifted. More often than not, there's a presumptive starting point. Why aren't both parents fit and capable? Why aren't both parents entitled to regular, meaningful access? In the absence of substance abuse issues, mental health issues, domestic violence issues, merely not liking one another doesn't move the needle. And more importantly, in a lot of intact families, decisions are made. All right, this is going to be my role, and I'm going to go to work every day, and I'm going to pay the bills. That's my focus. Your focus is making sure that the kids get everything they need, and they are where they're supposed to be, and you manage that. And that works out great until there's a divorce. And then what's commonly referred to as the primary custodial parent says, I've always been the one to be responsible for the children from the second they got up to the second they went to sleep. And that's changed a lot of bit. And a lot of courts now take a position, well, that's how you guys chose to do that then, but this is now. So unless, in this instance, the father can't be present or really can't handle it, we're not going to punish someone because those are the choices that you made as an intact family, which are no longer applicable. So there's definitely been a shift away from that presumptive primary custodial parent.
What about the person that says, oh, he's just going to send the kids off to his mother, or he's going to hire a nanny, he'll never see them? Is that,
Well,
does that mean he's not fit?
That's still real.
Mm-hmm.
And courts don't generally like having time for the sake of having time. So that is an obligation of the asking party to demonstrate what's called presence. That doesn't mean I have it going on right now. I have a working mom whose job is very flexible. She could be there until the time the kids go to school, and she could be there when the kids get out of school. And my guy needs about an hour on both ends, which is completely reasonable. He's getting a real tough time over that after-school program. I personally think that that's a normal and routine part of life, and we're going to prevail, but that is still an issue. You don't have a very good argument when you say, all right, so I'm going to have a nanny, and the nanny will be there when the children get up, get them on the school bus, get them off the school bus, and I'll be home around 7:30 for about an hour before they go to sleep. That's a much more difficult argument to make.
Mm-hmm.
But to the extent that both parents are capable and fit and able to be present, I definitely believe that the presumptions have shifted to much closer to the middle. Certainly in New York.
Mm-hmm. Those same dads are taking on a bigger role, and in divorce, it's really compounded even more. It's interesting to see. And sometimes they're like, I want 50-50. And then they got 3 little kids at home and they're pulling their hair out and they say, oh shit, what did I sign up for? So,
well, there's something that I have referred to as parental pride, which is oftentimes with fathers, the idea that anyone would judge them as a parent by a disparate custodial access schedule is not something that they can tolerate. So they're demonstrating to the world, I'm a great parent. I have 50-50. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't innumerable dads who cherish every minute. I'm just saying I've seen both.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Your office, I'm sure, is busy. Do you think divorces are going down in 2024?
I haven't seen divorces going down in years. The phone rings and people still need help. There are a lot of people that fight constantly for years after they're divorced. So you can see there's an electronic filing system in New York for matrimonials. And then so before someone gets divorced, it's called pre-judgment, judgment of divorce. And after the divorce, it's called post-judgment. And you could look and see how many filings have been made in a particular matter. And some people have 10 to 20. Some people have 400 to 500. The cost is astronomical. I don't understand how most people have the resources to do this, because it's not something that's generally put into a budget. $150,000 a year in legal fees.
It's interesting. It's interesting for even, I'd like to consider myself relatively having my act together, but the triggering effect on your ego, I don't know if it's men specifically, but it can really just like send you off into another planet, especially if you got somebody poking needles back at you. And then, like you're saying, then it all ends up in court and it just seems like we're hopefully finding a better way and educating people about it, but yeah, it's not going away.
I don't know if there's a better way, other than for both people to be like-minded. And hurt fuels conflict. People ask me all the time, how much is this going to cost? And I say, how much conflict is there going to be? And they say, well, I don't know. Why do you ask? I said, because conflict creates cost. People literally fight over someone being 10 minutes late. People fight over everything. My spouse got my kid a cell phone. I don't agree with that. And then oftentimes what I find is that the roles that people take in a particular debate switches, which is peculiar, right? So you've got one parent who's a staunch believer in day camp or sleepaway camp. And the other parent says, no, you're infringing on my time. Kid goes to camp. Fast forward. Reverses. The person who was dead set against camp now fights to keep the kid in camp. You don't know whether or not it's a legitimate paradigm shift or just fighting for the sake of fighting.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is interesting. They should require, I don't know if therapy would help everybody, but it seems like that should be like before you get your divorce papers, you're mandated maybe for a few months to go talk to somebody.
Well, here in New York, they do have some courses, mandatory parenting education, but I don't think that it's widely used or required.
Mm-hmm. Or effective. You have to want to change, and I think that's the hardest part. Is we'd rather blame somebody else for our problems than realize that we were part of it.
The greatest, I don't want to say clients, but the greatest parents that I have come across professionally are the ones that are actually capable of insulating the children from the conflict. The ones that say, oh, it's my night, but I know that you love watching Little League or whatever. So feel free. Pick them up, go to dinner, drop them off when you're done. People don't value that enough.
Mm-hmm.
And the truly best clients are the ones that do that in the face of hostility from the other side. And they refuse to allow the children to be malaffected by the dysfunction that is being imposed. And don't bad talk the other one. And don't make things a battleground for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's few and far between, but obviously it's ideal. And I've told clients that. I said, you're remarkable. And they know that they're suffering in silence, but that's the choice that they've made for the benefit of the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you do see people at their worst. I always tell people, like, it probably will get worse before it gets better, but that doesn't mean in a year you can't get your act together. You can't become more civil. So it's a shame that, like, at the most tense time, we're most emotional, we're most unreasonable, we're most in conflict. But, like, that's one reason you're getting divorced. You don't have to fight anymore. Give it a little time to breathe and then, become a human being again.
Well, I will tell you that I think that there's underreporting of crazy. I think that there are far more people walking around amongst us that are impaired, but they function. And then in a situation like a divorce, it really is a dominant influence. And there's not much that can be done about it because it's subtle enough that they seem like they're regular people, but they're really not.
So true. And it is a shame. And that is why a lot of the coaches and therapists that we talk to about divorce, it's like you can only control what's in your house. So, like, try to let go of what's going on there if they stay up till 2 a.m. eating drinking Coke and eating Skittles. You can only control what's in front of you, and that will be the house. That will be the safety that your kids remember.
Well, that's relatively benign. I'm talking about people who are subjected to multiple CPS, which is Child Protective Services, reports of abuse, neglect, sexual abuse in the absence of any legitimacy. That's the crazy that I'm talking about.
You're
That
talking about threats of it, or you're talking about accusations of it that are not
accusations.
true?
I've had cases where children have been subjected to physical exams as a consequence of a claim of sexual abuse when none existed. How crazy is that person that they would allow their child to have to go through that? So either one of two things. Either they're that impaired that they actually believe that, or they're that sinister that they'll do it even though they don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Happens all the time.
That's crazy. And then there are the cases where that actually is happening. So it's such a
Right.
It just makes the whole thing so confusing and complicated. And like you said, at the end of the day, these are kids that have nothing to do with this. They want nothing to do with this, and it's
Right.
a shame. Well, Evan, thank you so much. Let people know where they can find you. You're a New York divorce attorney.
I am out of Westchester, New York, which is north of New York City. Website URL is weedlaw.com, WIEDLAW.com.
We will leave links for that. Evan, thank you so much for being on today. This was a really illuminating conversation of, the stories behind a divorce lawyer, what you guys see. It's very interesting.
Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure.
All right. See ya.